Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of the Deployment Dudes podcast. I'm here with my esteemed colleague Scott Hutter. Scott, how are you?
Good, Phil. How are you doing?
Wonderful.
With Mr. Clay Martin here again, we are going to dive into how we are using AI as an organization. Now, I don't want to say we are ahead of the curve, but we've been in our AI journey for a couple years now, right, Clay?
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah, take me back. What was the first that we integrated AI Copilot into our system, and what was that? What was that first use case or reason we decided to jump on board?
Yeah. So I guess it was at the end of 2022. Phil and I and some others were sitting in a conference room at the Kinettix headquarters, playing with this new tool. It was ChatGPT 3.5 at the time. Now I've been in software for longer than I'd like to admit, and I've seen a lot of the technologies that kind of emerge over time get overhyped. You see this over and over and over again. But I knew playing with the ChatGPT 3.5 interface that the world was about to change. And so we had a lot of fun in the conference room that day, but I think I walked away from that.
I don't know if I'd describe fun since it was being pointed at me.
It was pointed at you. I'm not sure we're allowed to talk about.
No, we're probably not.
Yeah. So, but it involved Phil, and that's all. That's all that I'll say about it. But yeah, I walked away from that, and I knew that I had a bunch of homework to do because I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. Are you guys familiar with the Turing test?
No.
Yeah,
The
you
what?
know who Alan Turing is. So Alan Turing is this computer scientist, really famous guy in the computer science space, but like he was decoding Nazi messages and stuff in World War II. Like the guy was a genius, and he put together this test, right, called the Turing test, and he said, "We'll know artificial intelligence is here when you can have a conversation, a text conversation with an AI, and not really know that you were talking to a computer." That was the Turing test.
Yep.
And for me, the first time the Turing test ever passed was when I was playing with ChatGPT 3.5 in the conference room.
Yep.
And so I remember every December we have a big team in the Philippines, and every December we record like a Merry Christmas kind of a message. And so what I did that year was I just decided that I was going to have ChatGPT write a rap song, and no matter what it spit out, I was going to try to do the rap, like perform the rap and record it. And I'd given it some information about various people on the team, and some stuff I thought might be funny. And we recorded all this live. So like
Yeah,
I input
There's video evidence of this.
there's
out there?
video evidence of this. I input the prompt live, and then I did the rap live. We recorded it and sent it off to the Philippines. And my team was super excited about it. They thought it was super funny, right? One of the super compelling elements of that story is I think we always sort of thought, those of us like in the computer science space, that the one thing AI wouldn't be able to do for a long time is be creative. Like you think about like just giving a chat prompt like some kind of like inside like information about people, and then tell it to be creative and to be funny, and it could do it, and it did it in real time. And so once again I was sort of confronted with a scenario where I knew that everything was going to change. Didn't exactly know how, but I knew everything was going to change. And so when we started planning, going to kind of first quarter 2023, I kind of saw it as my responsibility as a leader at Kinettix that we had to respond in some way. I didn't know how, but I knew we had to respond in some way. There was always the option to like dig our head in the sand and just pretend like it wasn't there, or just say, okay, we're going to see how this plays out with everybody else, and figure, we'll take action based on what we see other people doing, and we can learn from that. But I knew that if we did that for us, having an understanding of what our CEO's kind of business strategy was, that could mean that we could end up being obsolete, right? And so I took it is the possibility of not responding is like an existential threat. Like,
Yeah.
that could mean that we would be no more in a small number of years. And so we decided to start putting together all these different test cases. And what we started doing originally was we were looking at ChatGPT 3.5, right? And trying to understand, like, we knew there was some way we could just use that tool, like as a business, and maybe we could become more efficient. Um, but we saw some limitations when we started putting those use cases into practice. So at the time, if you guys remember, you couldn't upload a file.
Yep.
In ChatGPT, you couldn't upload an image. It was not multimodal. So one of the first things I wanted to be able to do was, like, I spent a lot of time, for example, maybe looking at job descriptions. Like, you have a whole bunch of candidates. Somehow you have to filter through that noise, target a handful, set up interviews, and that kind of thing. So I thought, man, it would be incredibly powerful if you could use generative AI, ChatGPT, to, like, say, this is what we're looking for. These are our requirements. Upload, a resume, and give me a rating and tell me, give me an explanation for why you're giving this candidate, a grade of 85%. But to do that, you had to be able to upload a file. ChatGPT couldn't do it. That was our first use case. So we wrote an application that allowed you to upload a file. So you could do the resume thing, and you could give it a prompt and say, this is what we're looking for, give it a rating, that kind of thing. But there were a number of other use cases as well. Like, if you think about what people do today with ChatGPT, with, like, Excel sheets, for example, like, you can upload an Excel sheet, it can do some analysis and that type of thing. Again, you couldn't do that at the time. We had a lot of Excel sheets floating around Kinettix, as you can imagine, and so we thought it was compelling to be able to upload an Excel sheet, and you could do all that. Now, that required at the time a lot of what I would call prompt engineering. Over time, the token limitation of these models has increased exponentially. At the time, with ChatGPT 3.5, if you remember, like, if you input something that was longer than a couple paragraphs, it would give you an error, right? Or if you input something that was going to require a long explanation, you'd start getting this prompt response in real time, and then it would just cut off, like in the middle of a sentence or something. It would just cut off, and then you'd have to tell it. You'd be like, ChatGPT, can you keep going? That kind of thing. So we thought it would be interesting to try to solve for that, and so we wrote some code that would essentially, like, sort of string together prompts and responses in the background, right? Like, so it could keep telling the backend model, keep going, you're cut off, but keep going, keep going. And so that was another interesting element for us that we solved. Of course, that approach isn't super efficient, and, like, one of the problems is it just took a long time to get a response, and that's gotten much better over time. So that was our original implementation. Throughout that first year, the biggest learning was, look, there are all kinds of ways people are using ChatGPT in these models with kind of the basic interfaces, right? And people can use that, and there's a number of use cases, and millions and millions of people, of course, are doing that today. But for us at Kinettix, as an organization, right, context is king. That's what I learned. So yeah, you can solve problems like uploading files, so you can do analysis on files and that kind of thing. You can string responses together, so you have, you deal with the token limitation problem through technology and through writing code, right? But the context part, that was the key. That's what we learned. So in order to make an internal tool more valuable than a generic ChatGPT, we had to be able to set that context. And that is a very difficult problem to solve, but it turns out, like, there's a whole area in computer science that addresses this. There's a lot of applicable technology that you can use to address this. And so what we set out to do is, basically at Kinettix, we have a tech stack, right? That's what we call it internally. And that means we have a number of different applications that our internal engineering teams build and maintain. We also have third-party applications. So, like, for you guys are very familiar with HubSpot Our finance team uses Dynamics Business Central to manage our finance and accounting stuff. We have all these different databases and all this data and all these different areas. And we had to figure out a way to aggregate all that data, to bring it together, and then create indexes that could be used by AI. One of the things that's super interesting about these large language models is they have a native language. Like you and I have a native language, right? Like I think it's English for the three of us, right? For AI, everything, at least these GPT models and these large language models, their native language are these tokens, right? So they're literally like vector arrays of numbers, right? And so if you're going to be super efficient when communicating with these back-end models, you have to have a mechanism to take a user prompt, convert that user prompt into a token representation, to convert it into the model's native language. And so we figured out a way to do that, and then also to take our data across our data estate and convert that into the native language of these back-end models.
So is that our data fabric you talk about, or is that something completely different?
So the data fabric is the way that we aggregate all the data together. But from that data fabric, we create these vector databases. So that's data stored in the native language of these models. And so what we figured out is incredibly compelling and powerful for us as a business is to be able to take a prompt, convert that into a vector representation, and then scan that against our vector databases for relevance, take whatever's relevant in our enterprise data estate, automatically inject that into a prompt, and then get a response from the model. And that's game changing for us. And that set up everything that we've done since then. And we can talk about that. But the bottom line for us, we realize context is king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're basically teaching AI to use Kinettix as its native language, right? So all like RFP documents, our data, our tonality, all that's injected into it. So when it's prompting, it's looking at it through that lens.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so there are other elements to grounding as well that we can talk about. So it's almost like branding, right? Like you have to tell these models, you have to teach them, this is who we are as Kinettix. This is what it sounds like if Scott Hutter was to put together communication about this topic. This is what it would look like. This is what it would sound like. And that's another sort of facet of prompt engineering that we realized is important. And so we started applying this in a number of different ways. The quickest way we got to a return on investment is at the time, so this is, sort of the middle of 2023, we were paying a significant amount of money, as many companies do, to have professional blog writers write content for us that we can use for our websites. It's important that it's relevant. It's actually helpful out there in the world. The Google algorithms for SEO, they're like really good at they will prioritize content that's actually relevant and helpful.
Yeah.
It's so that service that we were paying for, we realized we could completely automate. And that's one of the first things that we set out to do. That was actually like taking what we learned from AI, like leveraging those learnings to build something that we knew we could get to a return on investment very quickly. And so flash forward, 4 or 5 months after we decided we were going to do that, we released an internal tool that leveraged all of these mechanisms that we're talking about. So that sort of model grounding, that tone of voice that you're talking about, vectorization of all of our enterprise data, being able to use what's called multi-shot learning. So if you say, I want to write a blog post about AI in quick service restaurants, right? There needs to be a mechanism to completely automate, right? If we're going to be efficient, you need to go out and you need to find any previously generated blog posts that are similar, right? Convert that to the vector representation, automatically inject that into your prompt. So you might have 4, 5, 6, 7 different examples that you're giving the model in real time. All of this is super helpful to making sure that you get a relevant response, like a blog post that you can actually use, along with the grounding. And so that was our first big success.
Yeah, let's talk about that too, because a lot of people don't realize when you're doing blogging and posting it on LinkedIn,
Yep.
you're not necessarily doing it for the sake of the quality content. You can't put something out there that's not insightful, right? But you're mostly doing that for SEO purposes. So
Right.
by having AI do that for you, then you're not having your salespeople, your marketing team spend time writing all these blogs and trying to keep up with the content. You can just have AI to spit it out in your tone, or at least use that as a starting point.
Well, and I had been asked a number of times to write blog posts. I've got a bunch of them floating out there. If I write a blog post, it cannot go to production, right? Like I'm not a great writer. Like there has to be a copy editor involved. I'm going to make all kinds of grammar mistakes. I'm going to, it is not production worthy. At the same time, I can use our internal tooling, right? And I can generate a blog post that, is surely going to require some time to edit, right? But not nearly the amount of time, and definitely does not require a professional copy editor. So the blog post that I write today, I will edit. I'll spend some time editing, and then they'll go to the marketing team for approval, and then they'll get posted. And I'm guessing you guys have done similar things. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it's incredible too. I've talked about this a lot of like sales kickoff meetings with partners about like the importance of SEO and how we're doing it through AI. If you look at our results, the return on investment that you're talking about, for those key SEO words like field services, for example,
Yeah.
like we've been number one on SEO for that. Other than like the paid advertisements, obviously, we've been number one, and the main driver of that is the content and the frequency at which we're posting these blogs.
Absolutely. Another interesting side note is we're now starting to see people come to us based on searches in ChatGPT, which is also super interesting and another conversation that we could have. But we've had a number of use cases like that. A very similar one is we have a tool to help us respond to RFPs. This is a bit more complicated because we'll get a request for proposal that'll be a document in any number of formats, and there's more to it than the blog generation. You have to be able to write traditional software code to be able to upload a document, find all the questions, loop through all those questions, do all the prompt engineering and grounding and injecting of relevant data that we talked about before, and then issue an RFP response, give the end user the capability to make edits, continue to iterate with the model if they want to, and then have a way to sort of save off that data so that it gets re-indexed and added to our vector databases so that our tool becomes more intelligent over time, sort of bootstraps itself. And so that was a bit more complicated, but that was another big use case. But
yeah, I've responded to a lot of RFPs, and in a previous life, the organizations would hire a team dedicated to responding to RFPs.
Yep.
I'm talking teams of five to 10 people just to respond to RFPs, answer questions, go through all the questions and the data needed. And now you can do that with a click of a button, right? It's not perfect, but it will answer a lot of those black and white questions.
Yep.
Like what year were you founded, like financial information, all that can be done at the click of a button.
And it probably knocks out about 75% of it. And so think about the time savings there. It's incredible.
And an interesting facet to this is the more that you use it, the better it's going to get.
Yeah.
Right. And so just to kind of dovetail on what you just said, I talked to one of our partner companies. I'm not sure if we're supposed to name drop, so I won't. But this is a huge company that everyone knows, right? What they do for RFP response is they have a dedicated team in India, and so they'll take the initial RFP, send it to a team in India. They'll put together an initial draft. That draft will then go from the team in India to a team in the United States that will then modify that draft, and then someone will review it to determine if it's good enough, and we can send it to the requester, right? You think about that process, right? And you think about what we're doing today at Kinettix, and it's very easy to understand how you get a return on investment for sure.
Yeah, and I don't want to go off too far on a tangent on this, but why do you think that is? I think it's like you mentioned, I'm assuming that's a bigger organization, right?
It's an enormous organization.
Yeah, so it seems like the smaller companies that are just more nimble or flexible are willing to take more chances and try things with ChatGPT or Copilot or adopt them. Why would there be resistance with a larger company? Are there security risks or?
Bureaucracy would be one, I would say.
Well, the answer is yes and yes. The security risk. I mean, we just did a podcast. We talked about SOC 2. I mean, so when you're dealing with compliance, yes, there are a lot of issues that you have to deal with, and we also talked about the size of the and complexity of the organization. It makes it more difficult to be compliant, and it makes it more difficult to introduce and experiment with these types of things.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways where we've been super blessed at Kinettix. If we were a much larger organization, it would have taken much longer to be able to like prototype these tools. I can go to Scott Hutter and say, hey man, try this out, give me some feedback. That's much easier to do at Kinettix than it would be at a really large organization.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so the more fun stuff, right, has nothing to do with RFPs and blog posts. The more fun stuff is like what's right in the heart of the business, like what we do at Kinettix really, really well.
So I was getting ready to ask you the question around how our PCs, our project coordinators, are utilizing AI in like tech search in our end of day, because you've got, I don't know, 100 and some different project coordinators that all have their own style of writing for closing out these tickets, communicating with the techs in the field, getting the download of data from them as far as what just took place, and then summarizing that. Everybody's got their own style to that. So I think AI has played a major role in making that more uniform. Would you say?
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways we could look at that issue. Like, I would argue, and you guys may or may not disagree, but I would argue that the most important thing that our FSO team, our field service operation, our project coordinators, the most important thing that they do every day is they ensure that we look at an individual ticket, an individual location. We understand the unique requirements of that ticket. We understand the compliance scenarios. Those can be like really subtle, right? And we understand what the competencies are that are required of those technicians. And based on that information, we put the best possible tech on site for a ticket to ensure the highest likelihood of a quality outcome. That's the most important thing, I think, that our project coordination team does.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I disagree.
No argument here.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. That is the best possible use case for AI. And honestly, we've put more attention on that and we put more effort into that than anything else we've done with AI at Kinettix. So there's 100 different use cases at this point. There's no way we could talk about them all. But one of the...
Let's try.
Yeah, okay.
I'm kidding.
Well, so on selecting the best possible technician. So in reality, up until this year, you could talk to any of the project coordinators, and these guys are great, by the way. They really know the business. They do fantastic work. But I would tell you, they all have different ways, different strategies to solve the problem that I just attempted to articulate. Like they all have a different approach.
And they all have a different perception of what good is too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As any of us would.
Right. But what we want to do at Kinettix is we want to be consistent. Like we think that's a differentiator. I believe it already is a differentiator. I think we do it better than anybody else.
We agree.
Nonetheless, AI can be leveraged to make sure that consistency is there every single time. So what we started doing is we took a number of approaches simultaneously. We're actually working with the University of Miami right now. We have a couple different capstone projects related to AI. And so there are two teams that are just finishing up a semester's worth of exploring AI use cases, specifically to tackle problems at Kinettix, right? One of those is the ticket tech matching that I just talked about. The other one has to do with negotiation, and those are the two I'd like to talk about, if it's okay
Yeah.
with you guys. So, what the University of Miami students are doing, by the way, is it Miami University or University of
Oxford.
Miami?
Yeah,
University of
Oxford
Miami,
is what we're
Oxford.
talking about. Okay,
that
so
was Miami University.
I'm not sure. I always get it
Miami
wrong. Whatever I
University,
say
yeah.
is wrong. So they have a great computer science department and they have a great data science department. And so these students that they brought forth for this particular capstone project, this is the cream of the crop, right? So we're dealing with the best of the best at Miami University, right? That already has a great computer science and data science project, or computer science and data science program. Thank you. So these students are able to leverage faculty, right, and get feedback from experts that are available to them that, quite honestly, we don't have access to at Kinettix, right? We have a wonderful team of engineers, and we have capable AI engineers, but we don't have data scientists, right? We don't have experts in every
Renowned
specific
data
field.
scientists.
Right, exactly. So one of the things that they're able to do is they're able to look at AI in more of the traditional sense. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with like statistics and that kind of thing, but there's all kinds of ways to build these models, right? Like a traditional model to solve this type of problem might be like a regression model, right? So in a regression model, you look at all the data, all the historical data, right? So you might say, here's 100 tickets just for easy numbers. Here's the technician that was assigned. Here's the proximity of the technician. Here's the technician rating. Here's the unique requirements of the ticket. And then you might have this outcome variable that's like, 1, if it was super successful, the client's happy, we're happy. 0 if it wasn't, right? And so you can kind of look at the data and figure out how to sort of create the best possible algorithm that, based on historical data, is more likely to predict something in the future. So then you can say, okay, here are the unique requirements of the ticket. Here's all of the relevant data associated with the technician, and based on that, like, what can I expect in terms of a quality outcome? So this is the type of model, right, that the Miami students are working on. What we're doing internally is a generative AI use case. We call this TechSelect.ai. Probably, I would guess that if you were asked to ask our PMO or our FSO what their favorite AI tool is at Kinettix, they would undoubtedly say it's AI Tech Search. And so what we've done with AI Tech Search is we've leveraged a lot of that vectorization of data and these vector databases to allow searching for technicians. And again, we can use this native AI language where AI can sort of see relationships among the data that humans can't, even traditional algorithms can't. And so that's been extremely helpful for our FSO to find technicians.
Yeah. Also very helpful for the sales team. I
Very
use
good.
it all the time. Just yesterday, I had a client say, "Hey, do you have coverage in Canada?"
Right.
Sure. Where?
Yeah.
It said these 10 cities. So what I did is I typed in those cities, 50-mile radius, and boom, map pops up, shows the technicians and the places we've done work in that city.
Yeah.
So instead of me just saying yes, I'm like, yes, and here is a screenshot of each of those cities and where our tech coverage is.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we did.
Well, let's keep in mind too here, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but let's keep in mind as well that aside from just the labor platforms that we might be involved in, as well as individuals, in terms of technicians in the field, individual companies, individuals inside the United States, the fact that we're global and we've done work in over 110 countries to date. Now you've expanded that tech search way beyond, obviously, the boundaries of the United States. I mean, to manage, to find, vet, manage technicians on that broad of a scale,
Well,
is,
well,
I mean, AI is obviously a massive tool.
very, very difficult to do in the absence of AI.
Yeah.
Impossible probably to do it well unless you can build and scale people, right? But the problem with that approach is when
Expense.
expense. And so a quality outcome for our clients means, right, that there's a return on investment, and that's proportional, right, to the expense to them. So we have to figure out a way to do this and control our costs. I don't know of any other way to do it than with AI. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing. And so we built this AI tech search tool. And then we came up with this concept called TechSelect.ai. And what TechSelect.ai does is it uses generative AI, prompt engineering, vector embeddings, model grounding, all the stuff we've already talked about, right? And starts off with a set of technicians based on the location, the purchase order, the specific scope of work associated with the purchase order, and with all the technicians that are fed into it. Because we have TechSelect.ai, we know our historical costs. We know if those technicians have done work for the same client previously. We know how those technicians have been rated in the past, right? We know the proximity of those technicians. We know the tech might have a mailing address, right, in Blue Ash, but maybe that technician has actually done a lot of work, a lot of client sites in, I don't know, you tell me the city, right? Louisville, right? So we know all of that information, and all of that gets fed into the model. And then we ask the model to give us not only a smaller list, right, because it needs to be easily consumable, but a target list of about 10 technicians. And we want to know, sure, what their ratings are, what their proximity is, but we want AI to look at all that information about the scope of work, all the unique facets of that particular ticket, and determine what should the technician competencies be, like to ensure a quality outcome. So AI is doing all that. And then we're saying, okay, you should consider the competencies we know about that technician. And so when you give the recommendations, tell us what you've determined the competencies are that are required for that ticket, and tell us of the recommendations what technicians have those particular competencies. Also, give us an explanation, right? We want to know why you're making that recommendation. And so we want to know if there are any budget alignment issues to call that out, right? And we want to know if this technician has previously done work for the same client. Because, by the way, we know that's a huge predictor for us, right? Yeah. If you're a technician, you've historically done a bunch of tickets for the same client. You've been rated well on all of those tickets. It's highly likely that if we assign that technician, right, it's going to be another successful ticket, another successful event. And so AI then spits all that information back to us in a structured way. And so when our technicians today, when our project coordinators today start the vetting or the sourcing process, they're starting with a list of 10 technicians that have already been vetted by AI. We know all the fundamental boxes that we can think of have already been checked.
Also because of history as well.
Also because history is the most important element. That's where we get all our data, right? Yeah. And so you think about like how that changes the experience for the project coordinators and how it impacts the quality and the consistency for us. Because a project coordinator that before kind of knew about technicians that were in this area that might be good at structured cabling or whatever, they're comfortable with them because they've worked with them in the past. Or if the ticket's kind of new and maybe it involves a technology they're not super familiar with, maybe they know another project coordinator they can talk to about that and figure out, how do we start the ball? How do we source, right? And so that has been a huge leap forward for us at Kinettix, and that's only step one.
I'd like to think about the critical use case that I'm thinking of right now for that tool specifically in our dispatch business.
Yes.
Now, in projects, you usually have time, and we usually build it into our SOWs that we need and mandate an X amount of time to be able to get the project closed, get it stood up, get project coordinators all educated on what's happening, get project management building out the plan. You have time to be able to do that.
Yes.
in a project world.
Right.
Our dispatch world is not that.
Right.
I mean, we are sourcing humans all over the globe at a moment's notice. You don't know it's coming. You don't know where it's going to be. You don't know what they're going to be there for. You don't know what you're looking for. There's no crystal ball in being able to predict what's coming in the fashion of dispatch.
Also,
Break fix.
if we have to put a tech on site same day or whatever, speed matters.
Of course.
Yeah. Speed
That's
matters.
the point I'm making is that, I mean, dispatch is hard enough.
Right.
And AI is absolutely a tool that helps us rise to the top. Number one in ensuring that we're going to be able to maybe surface the best candidates for that particular job quick. And now you've eliminated all these other possibilities for the project coordinator that's not having to reinvent each time. Is this technician good for this particular? Calling them up, going through the whole sequence of asking them the questions and doing all the vetting and the stuff that we've been known for in years past. Now it just brings them to the surface level quick, and now you can start vetting in a much smaller pool and increase your probability of deciding on the technician that's going to take this job much faster. And so when you've got, I don't want to say SLAs because we don't have SLAs in this capacity. We like to call them SLOs, but you're trying to
best effort, right?
Best effort.
Yep.
But you're trying to put a technician somewhere. You don't know how, what, when, and where in 4 hours from
Right.
the time that it's coming in. Now, just because we don't have the SLA doesn't mean we're not busting hump to try to make a 4-hour response time.
Yep.
Because we have, the way our model is built, we have SLAs, if you want to call them that, built into the system where we're penalized by on what we're able to bill for that response time.
Yep.
So if we miss the 4-hour window, we now no longer can bill at X rate. It now drops to another level, right?
Yep.
So we're absolutely incentivized to try to make that request happen as fast as possible. And AI is a giant tool that gets us there.
Absolutely. And that's just step one. So today our project coordinators start with a vetted list that's generated using technology and AI to ensure that they've got at least 10 candidates right out of the gate. We know if any of those 10 are assigned to the ticket, it's likely to be a quality outcome. That's really important. So the next, that's what took the longest, a year ago, that step. Now, if we start kind of going down the list of what takes a project coordinator a lot of time, the next step is negotiation, right? So you've got 10 technicians, right? You still have to get in contact with the vendor or the technician directly, give them a budget, negotiate costs, all of these things. So the next step is we have just launched a vendor application. And why this is incredibly important is because when our project coordinators are looking at that list of 10 technicians that could be assigned, they can now say, I want to send an opportunity to all 10 of these technicians, right? And what that does is if the technicians have registered, right, on the technician app, we can send a push notification in real time, right, that gets pushed to their tech app that lets them know there's an opportunity available to them, lets them know what the budget is, it's got the PO there, they know all the important information they need to know about the ticket, right? And they can say, yep, I'm comfortable with the budget, I want to do this, right? We call that an application. Or they can say, yeah, I want to do the work, but I don't love the budget. We call that a counteroffer. So they'll say what they're willing to do it for, right? So now with a click of a button, you can send the opportunities and wait for those applications or counteroffers to come in. So you think about the time savings of all involved in that. That's immense as well, right? That's game changing. So what we're going to soon do, and this is going to go through a process to make sure we're doing our due diligence, make sure we're doing all the monitoring that we need to do. But at some point in the future, those opportunities are going to go out automatically. And so it's not even going to really matter that we have, not to the project coordinator anyways, that we have this beautifully vetted list of technicians, because we're already sending them the opportunities. They already have them. When a project coordinator goes into the ticket, what they're really looking at is all the applications for that ticket. Now, let's take a step back, right, and remember where they started from, right, where they don't have a list of vetted technicians. It's sort of ad hoc. Every project coordinator has their own way to vet a technician. Now they just have a ticket and a list of applications and counteroffers that they need to go through, right, and then determine who to assign to that ticket.
Let's take it a step further, and I think this would be a good way to tie a bow on this conversation.
Yep.
Do you think there is a world that exists, and if so, how close are we, or how far away are we to where ticket comes in, ideally through like an API integration, and that receiving, vetting the technician, negotiating budget, scheduling them, cutting them a work order, having them go on site, closing out the job, deliverables go to client? How is there a world where all of that can be done through AI with little, like really no human interaction?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and we have multiple engineering teams working on this problem as we speak. We've been working towards that for longer than a year. I don't know when the eventuality is. I don't know when we'll have that first dispatch that's automated top to bottom like you described, but it will happen. It's inevitable. And so you can think about a world where we're integrated with our client, right? So a client pushes us a work order from their backend system. Maybe it's ServiceNow, right? And so we then start this two-way communication process with our client. So we have this activity lifecycle of a ticket. Technicians found, technicians scheduled, techs on site, off site, uploaded deliverables, closeout notes, all of these different things. As soon as we know, the client knows. Nobody has to manually email the client or make phone calls, keep up with the communication, because it's all happening in an automated fashion, right? And we just talked about how we can automate the vetting process, right? So we can start with that list of 10 vetted technicians. We can automate sending the opportunities and wait for those offers to come in. And so you can imagine a scenario where using AI and machine learning, if your confidence level is high enough for one of these applications, you can just assign the technician to that particular work order, right? Here's where the other Miami University capstone project that we haven't talked about yet comes in, and that's automating the negotiation itself. And admittedly, this is a little bit further out there. I think the best way for us to pass cost savings off to our clients and our customers is for us to pay less for our technicians. I think that's clear. And we like to think we know what our budgets should be, but I'm certain there are many instances in which AI will tell us, yeah, this is the budget that we have for our ticket, but we know that we can find a technician that's willing to do this work for a little less, right? We consider that, in this concept of automating technician negotiation. So imagine the opportunity is sent to a technician, a series of technicians, all vetted by AI. The technicians receive, or the vendors receive those opportunities, and they'll either say, yes, I want to do it, or they'll say, no, I'm not willing to do it for that particular price, but I'll do it if you increase your budget, right? And you can imagine a scenario where all that's automated. The communication happens between our backend system, Dispatch One, and the vendor application, and maybe there's 3 or 4 turns. There's a human on the other end, on the vendor side, right, that's communicating with AI on our side. Our AI, right, like what it's trying to do, what it's motivated to do, is to optimize the margin for that ticket. That's incredibly important and game-changing for our business and for our clients and our customers. I have seen demos of a machine learning model that the Miami students have been working on. They have something that works. Is it ready, like production worthy? No.
You mean it's like negotiating with like a
negotiating
live person?
with a live person, with technicians. And so I think this is the most complicated of our AI use cases that will be required to get to that automated dispatch scenario. But progress is being made. It is inevitable. We will get there. And I'm not sure, like in your mind, of what you're thinking about in terms of timelines, but we'll get there, and it'll be soon enough. Absolutely. But it's that automated negotiation that's critically important. So automatic ticket submission, automatic communication with the client, automatic vetting of the technicians, automatic negotiations with the vetted technicians, automatic technician assignment, right? Automatic delivery of deliverables as part of that automated communication between integrated systems. All of a sudden, there are going to be scenarios where our project coordination team, in many scenarios, become exception managers. Those exception managers never go away. There's always going to be 100 million reasons why a human's going to have to get involved. Honestly, in my view, that's the real value of the project coordinator. That's the real value of the FSO. It is dealing with, what happens when something comes off the happy path. This is true of software engineering. This is true of a lot of different domains. As a software engineer, which is what I know most about, the reality is you don't spend most of your time writing code to implement requirements. You spend most of your time debugging, trying to figure out why the heck the thing doesn't work, trying to figure out what to do in particular use cases, that kind of thing. That's the way our FSO will operate. They'll be dealing with edge cases. They'll be dealing with situations where the automation breaks down for whatever reason. And we have to be responsible, right? We have to do this in a responsible way. And that is the challenge that's been put before our teams. But to answer your question, yes, it will be dispatch.
Yep.
It will be automated top to bottom. When's it going to happen? I'm not sure, but it will happen.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to touch on, and at the risk of sounding like we're going to go down a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
I am curious in your response to this. AI has a lot of buzz around it in the media,
Yeah.
and people worried, scared to death about their livelihood and AI taking over and wiping out the human population, if you will, at least from a jobs perspective. What are your thoughts on the reality of that? I know that there are some experts that are 50-50 on. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say. And, there's a technical response to that, and there's a philosophical response to that. So the philosophical response is more like you say the experts are 50-50. There's this concept of P-doom around AI experts in the field. And what that really refers to is you've got these big personalities kind of in the AI space, right? These engineers that work at OpenAI, or they work for Google or Anthropic or one of these companies that's working on generative AI. And, these guys, an alarmingly large percentage of them would say their P-doom, meaning the likelihood that AI will eventually spell, the doom of humanity, is extremely high. A lot of these guys put the likelihood of at 50%, right? Which should be concerning. And to me, what that means is we need to be intentional about the path forward. That's really what that means. We need to spend as much time on AI security, post-training, reinforcement, human learning, all of these types of things. We need to put as much effort as we do in building the models themselves. That's what it tells me. The technical answer to your question, I think, will give you and anybody listening to this podcast a lot more solace. They'll feel better about it. Here's the reality. The compute, the energy that's required to build and train these large language models, it is immense. So if you were to say we were going to replace a large percentage of the workforce today with these AI bots, AI agents, agentic AI is kind of a buzzword today. Even though in some specific scenarios and some specific domains, that's technically possible, but rolling it out at scale is impossible. And I'll tell you why. Elon Musk, I don't know if you know about this data center he's building in Memphis, but this is like a gigawatt data center, meaning the amount of energy required to power this thing is roughly equivalent Think of a gigawatt as like a million people, a million residential homes. The scale is immense. We don't even come close to having the infrastructure today to roll out these agentic AI bots at scale that would significantly replace human workers. It doesn't exist. Will it exist 5 years from now?
Unless AI invents more efficient ways of doing it.
Unless AI invents more efficient ways of doing it. What's super interesting, I don't know if you're familiar with the scale hypothesis.
Yeah.
So what this is like if you look at the progress, if you ever mess with like GPT-3, the difference between GPT-3 and 3.5 is enormous. It was difficult for GPT-3 to pass the Turing test, for example. GPT 3.5, in my view, did. GPT-4 and 4.0, 4.1, these are always increasing the capabilities of the model, right? But proportionally to the amount of energy and compute and data that goes into these models, there's not really these big steps forward. It's not like the algorithms are getting better. It's not like the models are getting smarter. It's brute force. More data, more compute, right? More flops, more processing. That's how we're getting there. So the scale hypothesis tells us, based on what we've learned up to this point, how much compute and energy is going to be required to get to like this concept of AGI, which is another topic we could spend, hours on, right? But AGI is this idea that you have a general purpose model that can basically do anything a human can do, as well or better. That's AGI. We're not there yet. Some people think we'll be there by 2030. Some people think 2050. It depends on who you talk to. In my view, we'll eventually get there. The problem is, based on what we know historically and this scale hypothesis, is we don't have the infrastructure today to support it. So data centers are being built everywhere. There's new ideas about sort of how to, like imagine a scenario, something that this company NVIDIA is working on today, and some other companies, is this idea of connecting data centers, right? You think about like the way we use the cloud, right? Like we have compute resources that could be in different regions across the world, right? But they all sort of work together, and it's abstracted to us, and we just see what we see. Think about if these data centers that are training these large language models could work in a similar way. So maybe you have 10 data centers in the East Coast that can kind of network together and all train the same model. That's potentially one way to solve the problem. Now, the problem today is there's technology limitations, like the latency in the communication across the data centers doesn't support this actually working in a reasonable way. But there are specific technologies being built and implemented today that can solve that problem. And
so that's where quantum computing comes into play, perhaps? Or?
Oh man, that's a whole other podcast. But,
sorry.
Yeah, most of the AI experts don't think we need quantum computing to get to AGI. And what they know based on history is that this scaling works. And so that's kind of what they're targeting now. So if there is solace, personally, I don't believe that a large percentage of the workforce will get displaced. I think our jobs will look different.
Augmented.
To be sure. It will augmented, or our jobs might look completely different. Nonetheless, history tells us that there will be all kinds of reasons why humans still need to do work. Think about like the promise of the iPhone or the smartphone. Like everybody thought they were going to be more productive. Do you feel more productive? I certainly do not. The reality is just different than what intuition tells us maybe we should expect. But nonetheless, it doesn't matter. At least in the short term, we don't have the infrastructure to support mass displacement. That's my view.
Yeah, they say replacing jobs will be replaced by people who know how to use AI.
That's clear. And I think you're seeing that today. That's 100% true.
Well, Clay, thank you for being a guest today. Fantastic and fascinating discussion on AI. Hope our listeners enjoyed today's session. And until next time.
Yeah, thank you.